All right. All right. Welcome everybody to our weekly live training right here in this wonderful Facebook group. We got another exciting show for you tonight. I don't know if you guys saw the announcement or not, but I made it football related. I am a football fan, and I'm sure that there's some other football fans out there. So as you guys come on, I want you to drop a comment and let us know, one, where you're listening from, and two, if you're a football fan, who is your team? I'm in Houston. My team is the Texans. We're not going to talk about that, but we'll see what happens this year. But our topic tonight is in relation to football season and how a football team works. In relation to real estate, believe it or not, there is a little bit of similarity there. During the off season, a football team, like once they have the draft, they'll draft players and everything, and they'll get their roster up to, I think it's 90 players or a little bit over 90 players. And then by the time the season starts, they have to cut down their roster to 53. And then they also have a practice squad. So the theme of tonight's show is, are you in the game? Okay, because you can be suited up and on the sidelines, you could not make the cut. In other words, in real estate terms, not making a cut means going out of business. And there's a lot of reasons that players will be cut from a team. Sometimes it's lack of talent, sometimes it's lack of versatility. Like for example, a running back can have multiple skills. Sometimes there's a running back that can line up as a wide receiver, or they can play on the kickoff return or the punt team. But then there's some running backs that they're just a running back. And so that's the same thing with real estate. If you are a wholesaler investor, you want to be able to have multiple exit strategies, and you also want to be able to have multiple strategies for acquisitions as well. You want to be able to present and negotiate with your sellers multiple types of deals. If you're just out there just strictly making cash offers, you're cutting yourself short. And that's what we want to talk about tonight, because the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more versatile you are, the more things you can do, which means you are going to make the cut and you will be in the game, not just on the sideline. So that's kind of some things you can expect us to be talking about tonight. Again, for the people that are just joining on, drop a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. And if you happen to be a football fan, who's your team? So I'm going to go ahead and bring Ray into the conversation. How are we doing, Ray?
Fine. And my team, I saw some highlights of them the other day. And my team, the Houston Oilers, I'm wild about them. So I just think they're great.
Well, hopefully the Oilers make the Super Bowl this year.
You mean the Houston Oilers or the Tennessee Oilers?
Mm-hmm. No, they're two different organizations. But no, I remember the Oilers. I wasn't a huge football fan back then when the Oilers were playing, but I did watch them, and they're Houston.
I've decided I'm not going to be a football fan because I'm not going to watch 21-year-old millionaires. I'm not going to give them 3 hours on my Sunday so I can watch 21-year-old millionaires. I'm too busy working on my own stuff. So that's my plan. It is interesting, though. A few years back, I saw one of the New England Patriots or something deplaying. And it's like, I thought they said there was 45-man roster. You're saying it's 53-man roster?
So it's a 53-man roster that you can have on game day. Now, the interesting thing is they're allowed to dress 46. So 7, even though they're on the active roster, 7 players don't even dress. And so they're on the sidelines. Sometimes it's a healthy scratch. Sometimes it's because of injury. But there could be a number of different reasons that they're not in the game.
Well, the reason I remember the 45 or thought it was 45 is because then they're watching the highlights as they were deplaning, and I think they were coming to Houston whenever the last time they came to Houston, and it said 45 players and 35 coaches. And I thought, wow, that, and I guess it makes sense because these guys are 25 years old. They've been playing football at that point. A lot of those guys have been playing football 18 years, right? Because they've been playing since they're 6 or 7 years old, and they're the elite. They're operating at the highest level, and they got coaches, because the difference between massive success and dismal failure is just doing a couple of things different. And it's that, I guess it's their coach's job to say, hey, that's not going to work. You have to do it like this. You have to move like this. You have to throw like that. You have to, whatever football players go through. So,
yeah, always got to have, they have they have a coach. Each position has their own coach. And then they have, like, say, for example, if it's defense, each defensive position has their own coach. And then they have a defensive coordinator that's over all of those coaches. Then you have the head coach, the assistant coach, and then you have trainers. So there's no shortage of coaching. But let's go ahead and jump right in. Ray, how actually set it up to where you could just, if it's possible, if you have it up, if you can share, but if not, we can just go through it because I've got it up on mine. But one of the slides in our webinar that we did on Saturday, one of the slides says ways I have bought to hold. And I kind of wanted you to share that and kind of run through it. I know we only got about 50 minutes here, but would you run through this and just give some people some examples of how you can actually buy properties other than all cash?
Did I successfully share my screen?
You did.
Okay, good. Okay, well, I'm going to take my eyes off the camera because I've got a second screen next to it. So I'm just going to read, but they can see that too. So hopefully they'll just follow me. So some of these things could be considered buying or selling, and even though it might have the same name, you would do it differently depending on whether you're buying or selling. It'd be set up different. So we can buy on a lease option, we can sell on a lease option, but this slide is called how I personally bought properties. And so we've bought multiple properties on lease options. We've bought, and that's kind of a misnomer because you're not really buying it on a lease option, but I'm locking it up, I'm tying it up, and I'm promising to buy it in the future, and they're promising to sell it in the future. So in a sense, that's an acquisition process, and each one of these are like the lead into an acquisition process. And some of them on the surface are technically not an acquisition, but it's like that. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and talks like a duck or whatever it does, then it is what it is that. So an option, we've bought properties using options. We've bought properties, a master lease, and that's why I said this. That's really not, it's not acquiring it, but if you end up getting the benefits and the avails and the profit from it for 38 years, man, maybe we didn't do it for 38 years on our first one, but we did it for 35 years. Well, then that's pretty close to acquiring it. And it turns out on that very first one we did acquire it. We did buy it recently, but for 35 years, we collected rent and had no personal liability on that property. We've acquired by borrowing money conventionally. We borrowed money privately. This is generally like where you're paying, you're using funding to buy it. So private lenders, conventional lenders, private, borrow private and partner, and that's where you're bringing in partners to JV with. And we've got an event coming up, I think on the 18th, where this is really big. This is, it's when you're first starting, it's big, and as you get better and better, you still do it. We closed a property a couple of weeks ago where we bought several houses in a package, and we partnered on that. Our IRAs have bought the properties. In fact, that's predominantly how we're buying properties right now, through our Roth IRA. I'm trying to put as many in there as possible. We bought under subject to, we bought owner finance. Of course, we paid cash. Partner, which is kind of the borrow the money and the partner. Now that here I kind of distinguish between the two, because one is where you're borrowing money like from a partner, but then other ones you might partner by being the lender. There's just a bunch of ways to partner. Friend bought, I optioned. So that's kind of a lease option where it's not your standard lease option where you're buying it from a seller and doing a lease option. It's where you bring a partner in or you bring another party in, let them buy it, and then you do a lease option. So it's two different ways. And there's two different reasons to do that. So, but that's one of the things we've done. We've bought on a balloon and then sold on wraps. We do, in fact, I probably should say sell on wrap and split wrap. If we use a split wrap, that typically means we're going to be using, we're doing the split to bring a small amount of money to the table, like maybe a third or a fifth or an eighth of the amount of money. So that would be a sell on a split wrap. Or you could just buy on a balloon and then sell on a wrap. We've bought defaulted notes and then foreclosed on the property. We bought defaulted notes and then sold the notes. We bought defaulted notes, cured the note. There's lots of things you can do with a note, and it's almost like you're only limited by your imagination. And then the foreclosure, that's really three different methods there. It's we bought a pre-foreclosure, we bought during the foreclosure, in other words, at the actual auction where they say, do I have $20,000? Do I have 21,000? So it's actually at the auction. So the pre-auction, during the auction, and then post-auction, we've bought, which is called REOs. We bought in the REOs. What's interesting is there are certain times where different ones of these are just perfect based on the scenario of what the seller needs. There's other, or based on what you need. And then there's perfect situations, but there's also perfect environments. Like if you're working pre-foreclosures, you're probably going to find that you better master sub twos. If somebody comes and they're about to be pre-foreclosed, then your ability to put together a properly done sub two in a timely manner is really valuable. I mean, literally put it together in 24 hours. And it's very doable. It's just like, the first time you look at a property to buy, you might have to look at it 5 times and do all kinds of analysis and figure out everything. And when you get on your 50th property, you're not going to go through those hoops. You're going to know in 2 minutes or 5 minutes if it's a deal or not. And then you're going to make a quick decision based on that. So those are some of the ways that I personally have bought.
So Ray, question. You said that you bought before the foreclosure, at the foreclosure auction, and after the auction. Out of those three, do you have a favorite and why?
Yes. I in the RTC days, we could buy after the auction. And when you buy at that point, that's my favorite. So when you buy at that point, usually the title's clear, everything's ready to go, and you're dealing with people who are not emotionally involved. You're dealing with people who have inventory, they want to get rid of it. They're typically business people, and if you make sound offers and you're logical and you can solve their problem, those are just the cleanest, most reliable. If you're buying a pre-foreclosure, your deals can be phenomenal. I mean, they can be totally phenomenal. But there's a lot of emotion involved. It's very unstable. It's like working with nitroglycerin. It can blow up in your face at any time. You can put a whole lot of effort in it, and the deal just goes away through no fault of your own. So yeah, by far, buying at the after the sale, buying during the sale is also very risky because it's very difficult to manage your risk. In fact, that's a part where it's the hardest to manage your risk. It depends on your model because we're just anything we talk about, and then we could talk 3 hours on that subject, and that would be what I would call talking on the tip of the discussion, the tip of the iceberg. So but if it's during the sale, you basically are taking relatively significant risk unless you have a strategy to minimize the risk. And that's everything we do. We have to figure out how to minimize and mitigate the risk. And that's where I think the real talent comes in, because there are people that go to auctions every day and they don't understand how liens work. They don't understand how title works. And they make really bad decisions. They think they're buying a first lien and they find out it's a second lien, and there's a $50,000 or $100,000 first lien under that second lien. And basically they get wiped out just because they don't know how to title search. They don't know how the lien laws work. So it can be risky. Now, there's guys that buy at the sale. They know exactly what they're doing. They're taking calculated risks. Their risks are very minimum because they're very skilled, and they do just fine. And now the pre-foreclosures we have, and I'm probably talking more about this than you want to hear, but it is a very interesting subject. And it really needs to be in your arsenal of tools, because when that lead comes in and it says, hey, I'm a foreclosure, hey, I'm a sub 2, those deals, a lot of times we can hold on to, and those can be our buy and hold. So we got to understand how they work. There's no option on that. Nobody can disagree with me that's in this business that knows what they're talking about. You master these, you're going to start acquiring buy and hold properties with a few little twists and turns. We can take these deals that are, in a sense, perfect buy and hold properties and hold on to them for long times. They can make us very wealthy. We had to do that math to solve a question that somebody had asked. And when we did the math, we figured that a buy and hold person makes about 7 to 10 times much more per transaction than a wholesaler does. So it doesn't make sense not to get the extra education, because what you don't know can literally be the difference between working every day in transaction-based type deals versus holding on to these deals and then not transaction-based, and you're actually making money when you sleep at night. So that's when you really start becoming passive.
Yeah, and another element of that, we really don't have time to go into this, but on our webinar on the 18th, we will. But another aspect, if there's somebody out there that wants to be passive, but they don't necessarily want to be a landlord, but another option is to acquire a sub 2 and then sell it on a wrap. And in that way, you just reap the cash flow on that, and you're still getting the same benefit without the responsibility.
Yeah, and let me just tell you, like, I'm just do a thumbnail sketch. I'm not going to tell you how to get there because it's just too long to figure it out. But basically what happens, wraps happen all the time, where after the smoke clears, the person doing the wrap walks away with a wrap with $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 wraparound note that pays them for the next 30 years. So let me just say that again. After the smoke clears, after you jump through the hoops and do everything you're supposed to, it's like printing money on a printing press and getting a rate of return for the next 15, 20, 30 years. And it doesn't cost you a penny. So it's like you create this $10,000 income stream at 7% interest. Well, whatever that comes out to over the life of 15 or 20 years could be 25,000. So it's literally a factor of 2 to 3 times of what the face amount of that note is. So we'll try on the 18th to go through an actual case study where we actually will show you that. But to say that you can create a $300 or $400 a month cash flow for 15 years or 30 years, and it costs no money out of your pocket, that's just, it's hard to believe that. And that's what people like me do on a regular basis. And that's what we try to get our students to do. Now, if you're a wholesaler and you don't want to learn how to do that, that's fine. Just make sure you contact me and let me know so I can buy your deal from you. And we're happy to do that too.
Yeah, because we'll buy all the deals. So, Ray, there's another slide I want you to bring up, and that's the rule of 72. I want you to scroll to that slide because I think that slide is very eye-opening to people. But in the meantime, while we're getting there, does anybody have any questions? Drop a question in the comment, and then Hal, who is our producer, can let us know that we have a question that I can ask, get Ray to answer for you. So again, drop your questions in the comment section, and we'll make sure to get a few of those answered. But Ray has the slide up, so go ahead and explain what this slide is.
Yeah, this is my favorite slide of all time. Other than maybe some joke slides occasionally, but the serious slides, this is my favorite slide of all time. And what happened is for our RIA, I try to do a market report once a quarter, and I do it more for me than I do it for the audience because it's my way of forcing myself to stay focused on what's happening in what the current trends are. And this slide I came across, and when I first saw it, I didn't understand it. And usually when I get something like that, I just try to focus on it until I figure it out. And what I didn't realize was this slide had a major gift contained in it. And it's one of those things, you think it says one thing, but then you think about it in terms of how that applies to you. How does this slide apply to you? And when I started thinking about it in a certain way, it just literally changed the way I think about everything. I probably was already kind of being pushed this way by my mentors, but if you'll just take a minute and listen to how I view this, the first thing it says basically, and just look at this top line, and let's say that your financial freedom number is $4,000 a month. Well, that would be 48,000. So whatever that is, 40. So if your financial freedom number is 4,000, and I'm going to say $88 per month, then that would be 50,000. So let's say your financial freedom number, a number that you can say, you know what, I'm going to take this month. I'm going to take August off because I've reached my financial freedom number. The other thing happens when you reach your financial freedom number is you stop doing things. You stop making bad decisions. Like you stop wholesaling. So you're going to keep wholesaling and make 1/7 of your profit because you can't reach your financial freedom number and you're never going to reach it. It's never, ever going to happen. And that's the big flaw with being a wholesaler. Okay. So now there is that guy who starts out, he's 8 years old and he wants to be a quarterback. And he is that one person in a million, literally in a million, that makes it to the NFL, makes it to the star quarterback, makes the $30 million or $50 million for the 4 years or 8 years that he's doing it. And to me, shooting to become the 1 in a million, I don't like those odds. You know, I want to be the 1 in 100 or 1 in 50 that follows these rules. So if you find that financial freedom number, and let's say it just happens to be $50,000 a year, then what this slide is saying is, assuming you can get an 8% return on your investment when you reach retirement age, the nest egg you have to have is $833,000. So in other words, if I have $833,000 of money in the bank and I'm earning 8%, then that means I've reached my financial freedom number. And when I first saw this slide, I thought, okay, who can collect who's going to save $833,000? And you know who can do it? The person that starts a job when they're 25 and 30, and they skimp and they save, they live a frugal lifestyle, they make the 8% return or whatever, and they finally accumulate $833,000. And the reality is that's almost nobody's going to do that. Almost nobody's going to do it. And I thought, well, the problem is how do I get to 833,000? And I don't know why I came up with this, but it occurred to me is that that dollar sign is confusing because it shows a dollar sign. So you think that's money, you think that's cash. But what if we said, well, what if that's equity? If I have $833,000 equity and I'm getting an 8% return, that still gets me that money. So this doesn't have to be cash. And when I saw that, I thought, yeah, this slide's super important, because now that means with $833,000 of equity, I can get a $833,000 in equity. If I do a sub two and I have $50,000 equity when I do the sub two, which is not unusual. If I can get $50,000 equity, well, that's 50,000 off that 833. So now I'm at whatever it is, 783. And I do the next one, and now I'm at 733. And then I'm in the 600. So about 15, 16, maybe 17 deals, I'm financially free. This is on sub twos. But what happens if these properties go up in value? Then my equity goes up, right? And if I'm paying on this, and I say I'm paying it because the tenant is the one that pays on these things, right? So the equity increases more because there's literally a mortgage pay down. So in no time at all, I can accumulate this $833,000 in my financial freedom. And if it's, let's say it's 16 deals or 16 deals on average, you can do it 16 deals. If you did one deal a quarter, that's 4 years, you're done. And that means if you can't do one deal a quarter, that working part-time, you're just not trying hard enough. You need to immediately go and to figure out how these pre-foreclosures work. And then you'll find out you got a lot of these deals. And so that really can happen. Let me mute my stupid phone because it's making a stupid noise. So that was the power of this slide. It's not dollars, it's equity. It's all about the equity. And a lot of people, they're getting this equity in 4 deals or 6 deals. And it's very, very possible. In fact, the case study, are we going to do the case study on the 18th on the 100K?
Yeah, we're gonna try to do that. There's also in this presentation, there's also another one.
Yeah,
maybe
so
that is the one.
Yeah, so in this particular case, we got the equity of 100K plus in one deal. So that's really 8 deals, right? So in 8 deals, if you're hustling and you could do a deal a month, which is very possible, you could literally get to your financial freedom number, never do another transaction, and your net worth will continue to grow. If you don't ever do another transaction after that, just because the nature of the way real estate works, your equity is going to continue to grow under the right scenarios if we set it up right. If you don't set it up right, it'll shrink, but good chance that it'll grow. And that's so that equity is a good number to shoot for. Don't have to shoot for the dollars. You got to shoot for the equity. What's interesting is you can't eat equity. You can eat cash flow, right? You can eat with cash flow. So you can kind of screw this up and you can get a lot of equity, but can't buy groceries. So I personally put our family through that. We had equity, we had a couple $1 million in equity, but when the market changed, we weren't ready for it. And then we had a cash flow crunch. So we always gotta balance that. And there's guys that have been doing this business 5 or 7 years or 9 years, and they think they know everything about real estate, but the market changes. And when it changes, and you go back to that first slide and you have more tools in your arsenal, you change with the market. Like right now, there aren't a lot of foreclosures in any market. But what happens when we start getting foreclosures? Do you know how to talk to people? Do you know how to do the sub two? What if there aren't a lot of foreclosures, but one just happens to end up in your inbox? Do you know how to convert it? Do you know how to make a deal with it? Or same with defaulted notes. Do you know how to take advantage of them? Do you know how to set that up? And so that's what we want to do. We want to kind of understand these things. I don't think you have to be an expert on it, but you have to know enough about it to say, yeah, that's the right strategy for this deal. How do I put it together? Who do I know that can help me put it together? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the key is as the market shifts, you make the roster and you make the cut, that you don't get cut and don't go out of business. And that's why we started focusing on this, because we don't know if the market's going to change in 3 months or 5 years from now.
It's going to change. It always changes. It never stays the same. And what's interesting is, and I'm probably in our 5th correction or whatever, 4th or 5th change, it's been different every time. It's really kind of cool in a sense. I mean, other than the fact that there's, severe hemorrhaging and a lot of dead bodies along the way, it is interesting how it does change and what opportunities are created. I mean, we're about to go into major taxation. In fact, tonight, after this is over, I'm going to be listening to advanced tax classes on tax strategies moving into the future of what some of the smartest guys in the country are thinking are going to happen with real estate. Because I don't want to wait. I want to know ahead of time. I want to start putting myself in the right place. So and the big taxes are coming. I mean, they're in legislation right now. They're figuring out how they're going to do, and we better come up with a plan on how to cover ourselves on taxations. And also, big taxation also creates opportunities. So, got to figure it out.
So, Ray, we through. What is there any book that you can recommend on creative financing or subject to?
I don't know on the sub two. When I first started, there wasn't anything out there. There may be something out there now, but we just ended up creating our own stuff. And we've been doing sub twos for probably 35 years. And a lot of the sub twos have been paid off. We're constantly dealing with sub two issues, but that's just the nature of the beast. They're so powerful that you just need to learn how to do them. It took us years to figure out how to do them. And because there are little nuances that we weren't quite doing right, we had to kind of improve as we went and learned in real time. I think we pretty much got them down, but as rules change, we have to change with the rules and adapt. And like our disclosures, our property management agreements, our trust, just doing those, setting those up so that we're protected and we're flexible and we can move around. But they might come out and say, for example, we have a situation where a person's getting new financing, and the underwriter needs a disclosure from us saying that we're making the mortgage payment. So, that doesn't happen often, but when it happens, you got to be ready to give them the information.
So Ray, on further down in the presentation, do you have like a drawing, just like a preview drawing of just the basic ways that a sub two works? I know it's a complex thing, but just want to give them a preview. And also, while you're bringing that slide up, I want to let everybody know that we have a webinar. We've already mentioned it a couple of times. We have a free webinar on the 18th, which is not this Saturday, but the following Saturday. If you want in on that, drop a comment and say in the game, and we'll make sure that you get registered for that. We'll get you the link so that you can attend. Again, that's on September 18th. It's a free webinar. We're going to dive deep. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into this on the 18th. So drop in the game, and I'll reach out to you and I'll get you that information tomorrow. So go ahead and take back over, Ray, and go through this.
Yeah. So in fact, Hal, you hurt my feelings. He's the producer, and he said, Ray, we need these to look a little bit more professional. And it's like, I think they're exciting. I mean, they're hand drawn. They say what it is. I mean, it's perfect. If I made this, I mean, I got to decide, am I going to be producing professional grade educational material, or am I going to be buying houses and talking to my students on how to put the deals together? And so this is the most you're ever going to get from me. If it gets nicer looking than this, then you need to ask yourself, is he really spending his time doing what he's talking about, or is he an educator? So anyway, so this is on the thing on the 18th. We'll step you through the steps. And so it goes like, this is how a basic deal starts. This is how a deal kind of looks with a lender. This is what happens 1 second after they close, how the names are changed. And then this is just a kind of a breakdown of one segment of the sub two. And then this is kind of what a representation of a sub two is when you walk up on it on a street. And so, and you want me to just kind of talk in detail about this, James?
Just like maybe like 2 or 3 minutes on each one, because we got about 15 minutes left, 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay. Well,
and we want to make sure that if anybody has any questions, that we get those answered.
Yeah. So this is what I would say. This is as almost a perfect drawing. I'm so proud of it, and I did this on my screen, and I did that with a pen. And I apologize if I could have used a ruler or something, but then it wouldn't look like, hey, this is really how you do it. So, but this is like what a sub two would be when you walk up to it on the street. You have an owner, you have an investor, and then you have a bank. And this is when the deal's done, this is the transaction going on. So the investor gives the owner a cash, and then the owner gives the investor a deed. So between the investor, there's cash and there's a deed. And then between the owner and the bank, there's a note and deed of trust. So right after this happens, like this is in order to make the deal happen, but let's say this deal just happened and it's 1 second later. Well, this person is no longer the owner, but the owner still has a note and deed of trust to the bank. This person now becomes the owner because they got the deed, and a deed, says I hereby grant, convey all my rights and interests to the property. So the deed is now given to the investor. So the second the investor receives that, he's the owner. So he doesn't have the cash, but he's the owner of the property, and he doesn't have an obligation to the bank because he's not connected to the bank. So these lines kind of go away right here, right? So the investor's sticking out there, and because he got the deed, it was conveyed to him, he's now the owner. This one is, this one's showing a little bit more complicated. This is kind of like the summary of the transaction, but this is more showing a lot of the other stuff, like there may or may not be cash between the investor and owner. There may or may not be a note and deed of trust between the owner. Typically, the investor really will pay some cash to the bank because there's arrears. They often will pay other cash to other parties, tax entities and stuff like that. And then they'll often give cash to the owner. So this is a more detailed version of this. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
I think that's just perfect drawings. I don't see how anybody could do better than that. I mean, I guess I could have used different color fonts.
Well, Ray, I got to let you know that it wasn't Hal that told you that.
It was Jerome. That's right. It was Jerome. Yeah. See how, and when I said Hal, I was thinking, Hal would love this. I mean, this is not the kind of thing Hal would. He loves block diagrams. He's a tech, so he wants to know inputs and outputs. This is Hal language here, and so I was like, yeah. Hal wouldn't dislike that. I don't know why I came up with that.
So he put a comment in the chat here. It says, but in that situation, the deed is still beholden to the bank. The note still has to be paid or the deed will be taken back by the bank, correct?
Yeah, because the bank has a security instrument called the deed of trust, DOT, deed of trust. And so that security instrument, the deed's actually, before this deed's given here, this is kind of a superior deed and it's put in trust. So the bank at any time that there's a default, they can take that deed back out of trust and convey the title to themselves or whoever they want. So this deed here is superior to this deed because this happened when the people bought the property. This deed might have happened 1 year later, or 15 or 29 years later, right? So this is a superior deed here. So the bank can take it back. If the note goes in default, then the bank can declare the loan. They can do what is called accelerate the loan. And if they accelerate the loan, then they can just do what's called a notice of substitute trustee sale, and then they'll turn around and foreclose on the property.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions? I know that we've gotten a lot of good information tonight. Is anybody there confused? I know sometimes that this stuff can be confusing. I'm just asking if anybody's confused, if they have any questions, because I know sometimes, especially when we breeze through this stuff, sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming or a little bit confusing. So I just want to make sure that we're coming across clear.
One of the things is, I think to be successful in real estate investing, it's like has its own vocabulary, it has its own set of rules, and you don't have to be like we showed those 15 different ways or however many it were. You don't have to be an expert at all of those. You can specialize in just one. Like a lot of wholesalers, that's all they specialize in, and they don't know those other things exist, and so they don't specialize in it. Or a lot of times people just say, I know people, for example, that just do nothing but sub twos, and they're walking away from deals that might fit better. And I think what you'll see is you're going to do, like, for example, we buy a lot of properties for cash. So we're really focused on getting partners and JVs and the funding. And so, like with to be COM compliant, it means know-how, right? It means that you have to have the attitude that you will beat this thing, you will win. You got to have leads and you got to have money, right? So so we know that we're always going to do that, and so it allows us, if we put ourselves in that position, it allows us to do a lot of variables. But you can specialize in one, but you don't want to walk away from something that's going to generate a lot of profit just because it's not your specialty. And I recommend, if you're starting, you don't want to master 15. You want to know the theory behind it, right? You want to know like 30 minutes behind, like, tell me more about a master lease. How does that make sense? Why does that work for me? And then put that in the back on a shelf in the back of your brain, and then do the one that makes sense. The only ones that don't make sense to me is flipping and wholesaling. I regret spending the time and talent and energy that I spent. About 80% of my time and talent has been spent on becoming good at flipping. And I regret becoming good at flipping. It's a big mistake. And wholesaling is a big mistake.
So Ray, one of our friends, Matt, is asking, have you ever had a loan or a note called on you?
They've tried on us like 3 times, but they were never successful. 2 of the times were because the seller wanted the mortgage out of their name, even though they agreed to keep it in their name. And our goal is to get them to sign the documentation and disclosures. So 2 out of 3 times. The 3rd time we did a wraparound, and that person turned around and against the agreements and the terms of the contract and the documents, they turned around and sold it to somebody else. And then now they're the middleman and they stopped paying us. So we started the foreclosure process. We didn't even know they'd sold it to somebody else. And we started the foreclosure process. And that's the second variable I see if you're doing wraparounds. Now, if you were to do a sub 2 and then turn around and rent it, you probably wouldn't have that issue. But if you're dealing with everything in business relies on trying to work with people who do what they promise, and they're not thieves, because thieves and bums can get to you. And that 3rd time, it was basically he was a thief. And so the end buyer was an innocent party, and they basically called the mortgage company and said, "Hey, what's up?" But we'd done a wraparound on it. That person turned around and sold it, did everything wrong, and then stopped paying us. So he was literally just stealing from that end buyer, because he walked away from it and decided not to pay us anymore. That's very, very rare, but it will happen. It'll occasionally happen. So you just got to be ready for it. And there's some very specific strategies that you can have to avoid those issues.
So Ray, what is one way that you would present this option to a seller? Like if I was a seller and you were talking to me, what is one way that you would present a subject to me?
In other words, take over the existing mortgage.
Yes.
A lot of times we're dealing with motivated sellers, and their goal is not to, they're not worried about the mortgage. They're worried about solving their problem. And a lot of times their problem is they need money to move. They can't sell the house because it's nasty and dirty. And so their primary goal is to let you take over the mortgage. They get what they need. They get this burden off their back. And there's a lot of people like that. And so it's not a hard sell. And when we do talk a lot about negotiating and how to talk to people, but if they're motivated, it's not a hard sell. If they're not motivated, then they're going to rely and want to have faith in you. And then they also, if they're properly protected, they're got to have the ability to unravel the deal, right? If they don't have the ability to unravel the deal, then they may not be able to protect themselves if you don't pay on the property properly. One of the things, think about this too, is like oftentimes you're going into a property where they need $5, $10, $15, $20, $30,000. And then on top of that, then you have to spend a similar amount of money fixing the house up. Oftentimes the seller's not, if they think about it, they're not going to be too worried about it because they know, look, you now have major skin in the game. And so they won't, it's relatively easy to convince them it makes sense for them, especially if you can solve their problem.
That is the key, solving the problem. So I guess you did a wonderful job tonight, as you do every week, but we're not getting any questions. So we'll do a last call for questions. We're about through.
Well, you did a good job asking questions, James. It's hard to ask questions on this because nobody wants to be felt like a dummy. And if they're not experienced or know how to do this, they don't see it. But here's the power of the sub-2, or here's the power. In a way, think of a sub-2 as like getting owner financing, right? Instead of your two choices are get owner financing or get third-party financing, right? If you get third-party financing, that comes, let's say hard money, for example. If you get hard money, that means you got to pay it off in 6 months to 2 years. It means you're going to pay a lot of points. It means you pay a high interest rate, right? And then you got to jump through their hoops and be approved and all that stuff. And then that's not a buy and hold strategy because you still got to get permanent funding from somewhere. Now imagine instead of all those problems, I do a sub-2. You don't need approval. You don't need to bring the majority of the money to the table. You don't have to pay the high points. You oftentimes will get super high, or super great interest rates. Great interest rate. Anytime somebody says it's a really good interest rate in rental properties or wraparounds, just substitute the word great interest rate with great cash flow. If you got a great interest rate, it's automatic, great cash flow. So cash flow, creating this scenario here, I don't need the approval. I don't need all those negatives. I don't need to pay it back in a year or 2 years. This by its nature is a buy and hold strategy. I mean, it just syncs up with that strategy. So if you're wholesaling a deal and you can't take over the financing or you can't get seller financing, that's a wholesale deal all day long. If you can get those things, and we've got to have strategies, we want to talk a lot about how do I get this to happen? Now that's a buy and hold. So if I can do, let's say I'm a flipper or a wholesaler, if I could do 4 deals, 1 deal a month, and one of those deals every month, every 4th month is the buy and hold because it turns out that it's a perfect sub-2, that's a 4-year retirement plan. I'm done forever if I want to quit. So that is the power of the sub-2. That's why we have to understand it. And I don't blame people for not asking if they're not familiar with it, but I think you need to, like I decided a long time ago, I was going to be a great negotiator. If time and energy and desire and study could make me a great negotiator, I was going to become one of those. And that's the way, that's got to be, and be calm, compliant. That's attitude. That's what we're talking about, attitude. You got to believe that you can be that person and understand it and make that happen. And now all of a sudden, the first sub two is hard. It's almost impossible to do on your own. But once you get it, the second one's easier. And this holds true with anybody. Like, oh man, this first deal is hard. It's impossible. I can't make it happen. I got coming from 100 different directions. A coach, his job is to keep all those variables off the table and keep you focused on the most simplest part of it. And then once they accomplish that, step you through that 2, 3, 4 times. And next thing you know, that all of a sudden that person that was your student now is becoming your partners and you're doing deals together. And I do lots of deals with past students, lots of deals, because it just makes sense.
So Ray, Matt's asking, when are you guys kicking off your private loan company? Not sure exactly what he's referring to there. But how does private funding work with you?
Okay, so basically, the private funding, I hate using the word private funding because to me, private funding means a person who you can buy dinner and explain to them what you're doing, and they're going to write you a check, right? That to me, that's the essence of private funding. And 9 out of 10 hard money lenders out there call themselves private lenders. And honestly, I just think they're lying from the very first words out of their mouth. So we're not setting ourselves up to be private lenders. We're setting ourselves up to be brokers of like Wall Street funds. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's hard money. If we're doing private funding and it's long term, then we're probably going to want to be partners in that, right? Because we're out there doing our deals too. If we're going to be guiding the people to do the hard money stuff, then we'll try to help them with that stuff. Right now, there's a lot of lenders out there who they need brokers to put the deals together. So we're acting as a broker of hard money, but there's a lot of it's long term. Now, as an investor, if you're going through an institution and you have like a W-2, and you don't have a lot of transactions, it's not unreasonable to get money at 3 to 4% range. If you're an investor and you're real active and you have a complicated tax return, the best you can expect is to get money at about the 5 to 6% interest rate. But you can get that money long term, and if you can wrap it, or you can make more than the 5 or 6%, which you should be able to. You should be able to make 9 or 10% on your owner finance or your wraparounds. Then you can get that spread and do real good with that. And I hope I didn't complicate that too much, but I'm not going to lie and say that we're doing private money, because the private money are individuals who are funding things with their Roth IRAs or 401ks, and they're making the buy sell decision. The hard money are going to be people who are using other investors' money. They're in the investing game, and they're lining you up with the proper package. And so and if you think about it, that's what a loan broker does. A loan broker aligns their customer up with the different investor type loans, and they can be short term or long term. And we have that set up now, and so we're actually working people through it. We don't have a big staff on it, so we're doing 1 or 2 deals at a time, and so we're open for business right now.
As far as it's more of a partnership.
Yeah, if we're putting our money in the deal, then we're going to JV with the people. So,
okay.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, just be careful on the hard money stuff. For example, on our Facebook pages, we get more people on there posting for hard money and funding everything. And I think about half of those people are crooks. And so we're constantly cleaning up that and removing spam. And I'd be real nervous about giving personal information to somebody that you don't know, or that you don't know somebody that knows it. I would be very careful with that. If the people don't, for example, have a website and they don't have a reputation, we delete them on the Facebook pages. And honestly, probably a lot of them are legitimate, but we don't have the time to do research on them and everything. And you can really hurt somebody if you're a crook out there. And Facebook, is kind of a public media. Even though we try to filter it, we're not perfect.
We actually have two that we work really closely with that are our sponsors on our radio show.
Yeah.
We have Tracy Byrne with Live Oak. I think she's in Central Texas, in San Antonio. And then who is
it's Dewey Wayne and Live Vesters. So
yeah. My brain had a brain fart there. So.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you guys are looking for that kind of money, they work with us. You should reach out to them. And then of course, if you need a partner on a deal, reach out to us, and we can go from there. But that's really all we have tonight. Unless Ray has any closing statements, if there's any last second questions, but we're about to wrap it up here within the next 2 minutes. I'm going to hand it off to Ray to close us out. But another exciting topic tonight. Look forward to this weekend. We have our in-person networking event over at Transact Title, and then we also have that webinar on the 18th. You can still drop your comments in the game, and I can get that information to you. But on that note, Ray, close us out.
Well, I guess thanks everybody for attending. This is kind of a dry subject. Hopefully I made it make sense as to why it's so important to try to understand it. And one of the things is, if you listen to it a few times, these things will start sinking in and they'll start making more sense. On the 18th, I think on the 18th, we're going to spend about an hour and a half on this, and we can kind of draw it out a little bit better. And then on the 25th, we're also going to do a class, and I think we're really going to drill down into the documents and stuff like that. That's going to be like a 5-hour class on that, James, or somewhere in that time frame?
Yeah, somewhere around 5 hours. Could be a little longer, could be a little shorter, but it'd be around 5 hours.
Yeah, it's be pretty intense. So, okay, well, it sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Ray. Thank you to our audience, and we will see you guys later.
And thank you, Hal.